the request of Ms. Hogan. She wanted to look at the budget as it stood prior to your board taking any action, seeing all of Governor Malloy's projected revenues. The revenue worksheet that you were provided at your meeting on, when you received the budget on March 8th, does not factor in that the revenues from the state will end up being where Governor Malloy, sent them out to all cities and towns. So there are differences. This was not how it was presented originally when you received your budget books. This was created at the request of Ms. Hogan.
So column 2 from March 8th and April 3rd have not changed. It's exactly the same.
Because column 2 is this year's budget.
Right. So what you've done is you've included Malloy's budget in the 3rd column of the spreadsheet dated April 3rd.
Correct.
Which highlights the increase or decrease of the 2 different budgets. I think we're all on the same page.
Okay.
Right. Column 2 minus column 3 equals the increase or decrease.
So what I think is important to point out here is that the budget that is going forward is not taking into consideration the state's proposed revenue cuts to the municipalities.
And the teacher pension increases.
Yeah.
Correct, because it's a number that's just floating out there in the ether. We don't know what it's gonna be. And depending on who you talk to, and you weren't at the last meeting, I had a little bit, actually I didn't go into the CCM conversations. There's many, many towns that aren't, they're keeping, as we're doing, just look at the expense side and waiting to make a decision on the revenue side. Obviously, if the revenue side gets cut, as you pointed out, in half. So Governor Malloy's giving us a $7 million cut in his budget. So half would be $3.5 million cut in state aid. If that were to come true, obviously all the work we've done up until this evening gets thrown out and we start all over again. Right? Because where do I come up, if you're going to split it 40-40-20, where do I come up with $1.4 million in this budget to cut, other than close the library, close the senior center, close town hall 2 days a week and keep it open 3. So without going down that road, because it's a big question mark, I thought we were on the same page of looking at the expenses as compared to last year, keeping our increases as small and as efficient as possible, and waiting and seeing what's happening with the state. That's due in a week.
Okay, good. Good, because we have a meeting on the 24th. But with all due respect, I think if Lisa has questions with regard to the projected revenues, this is an opportunity to address those questions or to review them,
Sure.
just so that we're all on the same page and we all understand the financial situation we could be facing a couple weeks from now.
I just wanted to review this, because you can get away from it for a little bit and just see where we are. I know we got nothing, we don't have anything new, but, so, I don't know, maybe it's premature. So what does happen? Let's say we pass the budget the way we have it, and the state comes back and says, yeah, we really are cutting it, what, X million, doesn't matter what number it is. Do we just automatically ask the taxpayers to absorb that? Do we reconvene and look at the budget? What's the process? I really don't know.
My vision would be we cut.
So we would come
And what
back
percentage, what number you give me versus what number you give Mr. Newton versus what number you tack on to the mill rate, the taxpayers, which is ultimately what Hartford wants us to do, will be decided by this board. But until we know whether it's 500,000, a million, or zero, and they're talking about the ECS not changing the equation on the ECS because it's devastating towns like Groton, which is a city in a $9 million cut with all those Navy kids, and they didn't consider that. Or The same is true in Norwich, getting a $15 million increase at our expense. So they're talking about that, and they're talking about the teacher pension being off the table.
So would we would reconvene if that happened, I guess, right? Reconvene and take a look at what we have to do. And would that affect our timeline for a referendum for the public to vote on the budget, or how does that work?
We can still have a budget and go through referendum. Let's say the cut came mid-year. We get mid-year cuts all the time. And Jeff got a mid-year cut last year from ECS, $120,000. Guess what, Jeff? Go find it. It's $120 to you. Go cut. And let's say it was a $500,000 cut to the town. We go, let's cut. What are we closing? What services are we pulling away from? And that can happen at any time, even post-referendum. We can have an approved budget that can go backwards, can't go forward, can't be increased, but can be decreased. And by all means, if the state does come back with $1 million, which is what I thought they were setting us up for. Let's put out there $7 million. If we only cut them $1 million, they'll be happy. If that's the case, it's still devastating to this budget, right? Right. So yeah, we all have to be prepared that when you set the mill rate and we go to referendum, it's not over. It's not over until the budget numbers are passed in Hartford.
Because of the cuts we made.
Okay, Beth, did you have something to add to this conversation?
That's why I've been saying, and it's not statutory, it's not a public hearing. A Board of Finance can have a public hearing anytime they want. If they even moved it up a week, but I know it has impact on the town meeting, but your belief that it's written in stone, that it's the 24th is erroneous.
I don't have a belief in that. I just asked what the process was.
If the appropriations, if the numbers change on the 24th, which I think they will, isn't appropriations wrapping up this week?
It's due like within the week. Yeah, I think it's Friday because the tax money, the revenue side, it will only be received by the state. I think Thursday or Friday.
And then the finance part.
Yeah.
Is revenue and finance, but so I look at it as, first, I'm comfortable with the numbers, whatever the numbers were that were voted on last time. So we go through the public hearing and assume nothing changes in terms of your revenue line. And then it goes to the town meeting, and we can't do anything at that point because it's going on to a referendum. We can't meet prior to the referendum and play around with numbers because it's set in terms of a fixed item for the people to vote on. Once the people vote on it, and if successful, we come back to set the mill rate. We'll have a clear idea then of what the revenue is. But I don't envision us suddenly, say, whatever the numbers are, if they change. Then we're dealing with whatever gap or lack of a gap or whatever we're dealing with then. I don't see us then going back, reopening budgets and playing games and saying, Board of Ed, I want you to cut $1 million. Board of Selectmen, I want you to... I see as that eternally they have to come out of a way to deal with that. I don't see us suddenly going inside everyone's budget as much as we could, whatever we set that mill rate at, like I'm counting on potentially $250,000 of unused fund balance from this year's revenue from that budget. We talked about the difference between $650 and something or whatever. So it's either we can't decrease the budget, but we can change the mill rate or not. If we change the mill rate to meet the gap, then obviously we're saying that the taxpayer is going to pick that up, depending on what it is. If we set it lower than what it is, then it's a kind of a dynamic that the Board of Ed and the town have to go through. But I don't see us being a player in how they go through that. That's probably where maybe I differ. But I'm just saying the heads of each division would be dealing with that. You might be coming through to us for appropriations or something like that, but you know what I'm saying? I don't see them saying, oh, Mark, I want you to do this, oh, I suggest this. And
No, you have never micromanaged, but I would fully prepare, I would be prepared to receive a number from you if the state revenue looks anything like, the doom and gloom that was first proposed, or anything close to that. We get mid-year cuts. We make adjustments. We don't hire the person that retired, and we don't fill the position. We do things just to cut back.
And the number would be determined by the revenue that's settled in by the state and our revenue.
Right.
Versus what we set the mill rate to be on that night after the referendum would determine what, if any, gap. Maybe there's no gap. You know what I'm saying?
Statutorily,
determine
if the Hartford comes back with a late cut, statutorily, we can put out an assessment mill rate. We can put out a second
Right.
mill rate. So if they come back with $5 million on June 30th, they can go that long. They could even go longer. Then we can, and we are able, and we probably will have to, as well as making cuts to all the budget books, have to go into the mill rate and make an adjustment there. I don't know the process. The lawyers will get involved, whether we have to go to a town meeting again, whether it's a referendum again, et cetera. I don't know how the process works.
I just want to make sure that everybody has a chance to ask their questions and address their concerns. And I have a few of my own, but I think I'll start down on this end. Bill, do you have anything to?
So one thing that Mark mentioned that I thought of on the way home last week, or last, whatever we were talking about cuts, I said 40, 40, 20. And then later in the night, I realized I didn't weigh enough for the Board of Ed versus the town, and it would be a proportional cut that I would propose. Where right now the town 26%, debt service 8%, capital 1%, Board of Ed 66%. So I created a little calculator that basically said if the state took away $1 million, how would that proportionally affect each one of the line items? And then manually we could add in for a mill rate increase. So I think I understand all the logistics of what's happening. I think I created a little tool that would help us think through some different scenarios so we can say what happens if, and what percentage of it do we want to go to the mill rate, and what percentage of it wants to go anywhere else. So I think after talking to Anna, I think I do understand that services can't be touched, so I took that out of the calculator. And I think I understand where we're at.
I think we're thinking the same.
Can we go down the line here, Beth, because you've had a chance. Jason?
Yeah, I haven't, I've given it some thought, but not that much thought. I'd like to see where the numbers fall and have to try to figure it out from there. I mean, that's it, really. No comment.
So one more comment if I could add. I know I did speak, but I think I'm kind of simple. I just want to be assured that if revenue numbers come back from the state after we've gone through our process, that we don't just take the difference and say, oh, sorry guys, taxpayers, our mill rate's now up 3 point. That's really the only place I'm coming from. I don't want the taxpayers to have to absorb a difference that we don't have right now. I want to understand and ensure that we have a process to come back and evaluate our expenditures. And so am I assured of that? Okay, then that's what I need to understand. Thanks.
One more
Beth,
thing, your
sure.
assurance would be guaranteed by the discussions of the Board of Finance, kind of along the way I'm thinking is the way Bill's thinking, how much one can handle the other. But as far as your assurances go, it's what we discuss as a group, and whatever position prevails, there's no magic in terms of, there's no set, Lisa, thing or rule of thumb. It's just based on discussion. Peter?
Just following this.
Taking it all in.
Taking it all in. It sounds like there's room to change as information comes in. So we're kind of going slowly, cautiously, and there's room to change as we get on the road as more information comes in. And you're saying possibly within a week we'll know something?
The Finance Committee and the Appropriations Committee are due to, if it's not Monday, it's Wednesday, but it's next week. It's the end of April, the last week of April. They're supposed to release their budgets. Now, the Republicans have budgets, the Democrats have budgets, the Senate, there's a lot of budgets floating around, but the Appropriations and Finance are the two committees we should watch. They're the ones who are going to get us out of the mess that we're talking about, making us whole.
So, okay, now it's my turn. First of all, on the Board of Finance proposed budget summary sheet, I'm glad to see that the number tied out exactly. So we're looking at a total budget of $70,827,806. That takes into account, let's just recap where we are with the expenses now. The $225,000 reduction to the Board of Ed, the $132,000 reduction to the capital account, the $20,176 specific reduction as a result of adding back $1,000 to the assessor's budget and taking away $21,176 from the two fire departments' budget. So, is everybody following me with regard to our latest expense number? So the first selectman and the finance director have taken into account all of the requests that we have made to date, in addition to the $100,000 that we asked them to reduce their budget. Here's my concern. If Malloy's budget were passed on to us, which I think we're all in agreement it won't be passed on to us, those cuts in that magnitude. But if it were, then I think we'd be looking at over a 4 mil rate increase, which means for every say a house was assessed at $250,000, a 4 mil rate increase would increase that homeowner's property tax by $1,000 a year. So that is the absolute worst case. The best case looks like we're assuming we're at a 1.3 mill rate increase if we were to pass the budget as it stands on the summarized sheet.
0.66?
0.66.
Okay, I'm not sure how you're getting to that
Okay,
number.
Based on using the original worksheet from March 8th, so in other words, not considering all of the Governor Malloy's reductions, it would be
So you're
0.66.
saying then,
File that.
for example, the 0.66% mill increase takes into account, where's the other sheet? Not the $7,044,000 in education cost sharing, but like the $6,900 something thousand, right? Thank you. $6,918,000. Your 0.66 mil increase
Okay.
was calculated based on the assumption that we would receive $6,918,000 in education cost sharing.
Based on
Correct.
last year's revenues. Based on last year's revenues.
So we're somewhere, right, so we didn't adjust at all for the possibility that we are going to get cut. Now, just to recap what happened last year with the education cost sharing, there was a $120,000 cut, which was absorbed completely by the Board of Ed. So we can't predict what that cut is going to be, but it's going to affect the taxpayer somewhere between 0.66 mill rate and 4.13 is what I calculated, somewhere in between there. So the issue that I'm having is that we haven't really accounted for any of the shortfall that may be coming our way. And not to do that, I think, is a little irresponsible, because this is what got the state into the mess that they're in the first place, kicking the can down the road. So now we're looking at budgets where we're still increasing the town budget by over 2%. We're still increasing the school budget by over 2%. The taxpayers are going to get hit up to maybe a 15% increase in their tax rate, potentially. So when we talk about everybody sharing the pain, I'm not sure. I think the taxpayers are really looking at the greatest pain here. And that concerns me. Because, I mean, we're still increasing our budget by over 2%, 3.65% in the general government. So at what point And we know that this is the beginning. These numbers don't even take into consideration the $2 million in the teacher's pension that we may be liable to fund. And I know we can't say whether that's going to happen all at once or maybe it'll be phased in over 5 years, but there's a pretty good chance that it's going to happen. And we're not really trying to solve that today. At the local level, I feel like we're still kicking this can down the road. So at what point does this board take a stand and say, you know what? This is not a painful budget. A 3.65% increase for the town is not inflicting any pain that I can see. It is a tight budget if you were to compare what we're proposing over last year. But at what point do we propose maybe reducing services a little bit? Where have we evaluated where we could cut back a little bit? You pull $650,000 every year from the fund balance, and a lot of years we've been able to return $500,000 of that. This year we might only be able to return $200,000 of that. So you can see we're not going in a good direction. We have to be mindful of the unfunded or the fund balance at the end of the year. I mean, because everybody knows that determines what our bond rating is and the rate at which we can borrow funds. But we can't raise the tax rate on taxpayers just to increase our undesignated fund balance. That doesn't seem right to me, and we need to think about that. We should be thinking about ways to save money, maybe not spend so much, maybe put the brakes on spending. I don't have it in front of me, but the graph that shows the escalation in debt payments over the next couple of years with the onset of with the school projects that are coming down the road. We should not be taking on any other projects concurrently with that project. They should be pushed out further down so that we have a more level funding requirement for those projects. I mean, we should not be taking on any major expenditures until we can increase our tax base. Maybe when Costco comes in. When that eventually comes in, maybe that's the time to fund some capital projects that we're looking at. I don't want to be caught in a trap of having to spend money before we're able to afford it. And we already know that our fund balance is low, and we're never going to increase it if we keep spending. And again, I'm not willing to raise taxes to increase our fund balance. That's got to come from good management and sound fiscal policies. So what does all this mean that I'm saying? I mean, sincerely, I don't think that we cut enough from the town. It's unclear to me if education cost sharing does take another hit, whether they would have to absorb that 100%. We know the Board of Education absorbed it 100% last year. What happens if the state does cut education cost sharing $2 million? Will they have to absorb the $2 million cut? Or will we figure out a way to somehow share the pain between the taxpayers and the town and the Board of Ed? I'm not really sure what the answer is, but my feeling is that a $100,000 cut from the town doesn't go deep enough. I think that, we're hoping that our revenues stay intact by Governor Malloy's budget, but hope is not a strategy. And I just think we need to make some hard decisions here. Where are we going with this budget? You said other towns, Mr. Nickerson, are accounting for the fact that they're just rolling over last year's budget into next budget, but I don't see that. I see towns putting forward the worst case and the best case scenarios, and we haven't done that. All we've done is put forward a best case scenario. And I personally don't feel comfortable with that. So that's where I stand. I'll be looking for additional cuts to the town between now and Monday. And that's what I have to say about the budget.
Well, what I have to say is, I think I've said before, I don't think we're being irresponsible if we don't know what the revenue is. And I feel that we will know in time. And I don't think we're married to these proposed reductions, because that's gonna be dependent on the revenue that comes in. And I think it's a discussion in terms of how we look at it. Do we look at it as percentages? Do we look about how we share that pain? I think that's a whole board decision to take place basically after the referendum, because it can't take place after April 24th, because at that time in the public hearing, you'll have one more time to revisit the budget, and then it goes on to a town meeting and a referendum. And when I think we're setting the mill rate, I kind of agree with Bill Weber's process, which, you know, there is no set process, it's a discussion, but that we're going to be looking at juggling many different scenarios in order to come to a consensus as a board. And that, for me, is the responsible thing to do. I think it was the mayor of New London that said, oh, you're gonna get a 6% increase. He wasn't even looking at any reductions. And then I've seen people act like it's not gonna happen, and I don't think we've done that, because we discussed the possibility of what can happen, but I don't wanna be in a position of projecting something that isn't in front of me. And maybe that could be considered irresponsible, but I don't think it is, because I know that I'll have time to adjust whatever mill rate I need to do, to be prudent and reasonable and fair, to come to a conclusion after the state has acted. And to do otherwise, to me, would be premature. So I'm basically gonna stick by the numbers that were voted on.
So I can hear both perspectives. There's going to be a cut someplace coming forward. I mean, if I had a crystal ball, I wouldn't be sitting here, and I would figure out something else to do in my time, but obviously I don't. So I just think, do you cut more later, or do you cut a little now and then a little more later? Because something else is going to get cut. I mean, a lot of the towns that I do read about, they've been pretty prudent in a 0% increase, or year over year, the numbers stayed the same. I mean, I can go either way, but in a month or 2 weeks or 6 weeks, when the cuts come down, is it going to be easier to handle that we made some cuts now and some cuts later? I don't know the answer to that, but we're going to be in a tough decision-making process here, and I think in the near term. And it's not fair just to pass the money on to the taxpayers. I think that's what Connecticut's done for years, and I think that's why people are leaving the state, and we don't want to see them leave the town. But on the same token, I understand the services that the town provides put people here, and it's a balance of education, a balance of services, beaches, all the great things that the town provide. But if there's nobody here, there's no services. So, I mean, I know personally, I've talked with my wife about the state of Connecticut and the local economy and possibly relocating, you know, on a very serious. And I don't want to do that. This is a great place, but I think we do have some fiscal responsibility to the town to figure out what we're going to do. And there's a lot of burden on our shoulders to do it. So now or later, I don't know, but that's it.
I guess I'll just